Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you a quick and easy upgrade you can do to just about any old car that makes it so much nicer to drive. As you can see here, this car is kind of an older one and the steering wheel has started to crack and it's kind of nasty to have to hold in your hands. And since this is the part of the car that you're hanging on to literally every second while you're driving it, I'm going to put a nice cover on it to make it a little more comfortable. So in this video I'm going to show you how to turn this old nasty steering wheel into this. It's so much nicer on the hands, it looks better, and it's so much more comfortable to drive. So let's get started. So I ordered this steering wheel cover on Amazon. The specific kind that I ordered isn't really important, so I'm not going to bother linking to any specific product. Just go search around on Amazon, pick the kind of style that you want, but the most important part is to actually measure your steering wheel correctly. There are two parts of your steering wheel that you have to measure. You have to measure how wide the steering wheel is at its widest points, and you have to measure how thick the grip is that you grab with your hands. So let me show you how to do those measurements real quick. Alright, so there's two tools we're going to use to measure this steering wheel for the cover. The first is a simple tape measure and the second is a piece of string. So the first measurement we need to take is how wide is the steering wheel. Just grab a tape measure and stretch it across and measure from the outside edge all the way to the other outside edge. This steering wheel is exactly 15 inches. Next, take your string, unwind a little bit of it, and then you want to run your hand around the steering wheel and find the thickest part of the steering wheel. Some steering wheels have little humps in them where your thumbs can rest at approximately this position. This steering wheel doesn't, it's about the same diameter all the way around. Take the piece of string and wrap it around the steering wheel and pull it nice and tight. And make a note or make a little mark or just hold it with your thumbnail where that string meets. Making sure you don't let go of that mark. Grab your tape measure again. And then you can hold the string right at the end of the tape measure and pull it down. And you'll see this steering wheel is exactly 4 inches in diameter of the grip. So those are the two measurements I need. 15 inches this way and 4 inches around this way. With those two numbers, you can go order your cover. Alright, so we've measured carefully and we ordered our cover and it's arrived. This particular cover comes with 2 pieces of string that we're going to use for the stitching. And each of those has a needle in it. I'll show you how we're going to use that here in just a moment. It also comes with a little thanks for buying our stuff card and some instructions. You'll want to read these pretty carefully. There are multiple different kinds of stitches that you can use for some of these different steering wheel covers. Some of them have thread that's stitched along here. Some of them just have holes that are pre-cut. That's the style that this is. Depending on what kind of cover you get will determine the type of stitch that you're going to use when you're stitching it onto your steering wheel. Now I opted for the genuine leather kind of steering wheel cover. I like the feel in my hands, but again, there are so many different styles and colors and types to choose from that it's really up to you which kind you order. I like this kind as well because since there's nothing already stitched in here, the holes that they've pre-cut are very easy to put the needle through. So stitching these onto the steering wheel is actually really simple. Speaking of that, let's move into the car and I'll show you the next steps. So the first thing you want to do before you install anything at all is to wipe down your steering wheel. Just use a damp rag and light pressure just to clean off all the gunk and grime that's built up over the years on the steering wheel. Okay, with the steering wheel wiped down and clean, the next thing you want to do is find the joining stitch on your steering wheel cover. This one's right here. We're going to want to put that stitch at the bottom of the steering wheel. So find that stitch, orient it near the bottom, and then begin to stretch your steering wheel cover around the outside of your steering wheel. This is going to be a fairly tight fit, assuming of course that you've ordered the correct size. So just stretch it around there and get it to look about like this. Then we can start with the stitching. The stitching begins by pulling out one end of your thread and tying a knot in the end of it. I like to tie several knots, 3 or 4 of them, to get a nice big kind of a ball of thread at the end of this thing. And we're going to use this to make sure that the thread doesn't pull back through the steering wheel when we start threading it through with the needle. Once you've tied the knots, you can trim off the excess and then you're ready to start stitching. Okay, then you're going to start with your needle in the first hole right next to the seam, and you're going to bring it from the back side through the hole and then pull all your thread through so that that knot stops right there. Then you're going to reach back and go through the front face of the rear and bring it across to the next hole in the front. And that is our first stitch. Okay, so then we're going to go down through the back and up through the front. I know these first few stitches are a little bit difficult to see, but I'm going in just making a simple loop that is entering the back of the steering wheel on the back side, going diagonally through the underside where you're not going to see, and then coming back out through the front hole. You'll see a better close-up here in just a few moments. So you want to get this thread very, very, very tight. And in my case, I want to overlap the front face over the back like this a little bit. Now you can do this by hand, but you wind up having a difficult time getting things to be tight and stay tight. So I like to use this kind of a tool. This is a little hook that I got, I think, on Amazon somewhere, made by Sheffield, I guess. There are tons and tons of these little kinds of hooks and picks and things like that. I think this came in a set with several different shapes of things. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to reach this underneath each of these stitches here and use it to pull the prior stitch really tight. So when I pull out this stitch here, it tightens the prior one really, really well. Make sure that the leather's overlapping the way that I want, then pull really tight. Then we'll move to the next stitch. Reach under there. Make sure the leather's overlapping the way that I want. And then pull really, really tight. Okay, that's as tight as I can go for now. I'll do several more stitches and then we'll come back and tighten it even more. So we're going down through the back, diagonally across the seam, underneath and out through the front. Okay, so I'm going to cinch that down pretty snug. I'm going to come back with my hook tool here. We're going to go all the way back and really crank these down. You'll see it takes even more of the slack out as I do this. And really helps to tighten down that cover. Okay, so once you've gotten to the first spoke, then you're just going to take the thread and thread it through the back side of just the front. We'll tighten these down again, which will help the cover lay nice and flat against the steering wheel. And once you get to where you're most of the way past that spoke, then it's time to start the pattern again. So here's a little better demonstration of that. You can see on this spoke, I'm just going through the front side of the cover until I get past the spoke. And then I can start the pattern again where I reach back to the back side and bring it through the back hole there and then diagonally across and through the front hole as well. Now with this footage all sped up like this, it looks like this process is super fast, but really it's going to take you a couple hours. I would set aside 2 hours if this is your first time, and make sure you're going to have uninterrupted time that you can work on this when you don't need to drive the car, because once you start, you can't really drive the car until you're done. Coming around the top side of the steering wheel, you can see it's pretty much the same process all the way around until I get to the end. When you get back to where you started, then there's only one little kind of tricky part left to do, and that is to tie a knot inside of the seam. It's really hard to do, so I actually had to bend the needle just like this between my thumb and forefinger of each hand, and then I was able to thread it through the really tightened part where I'd already started and pull it back out and loop it through several times and tie it off in a knot. Once you have that tied off really well, then you'll want to trim it, leave a little bit of extra length on the thread that you can then tuck into the seam where it won't ever be seen. That'll help make sure that that knot stays tight. Well, that's it. It's a pretty easy job. It will take you a little bit of time to do, like I mentioned. Set aside maybe 2 hours or so, and the results are fantastic. It's really worth this kind of an upgrade. These covers are really inexpensive. They start around $9 or $10. You can get some really fancy ones that are a little more than that, but it's a pretty inexpensive upgrade to make your driving experience that much better, even on a really old car. Well, I hope you've learned something. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen. If you have, maybe give me a little thumbs up down there at the bottom and consider subscribing so you can see more videos like this in the future, but no pressure. And as always, thank you very, very much for watching.